Fantasy Baseball Neck, everybody. This is Austin, and we got some familiar faces returning to the lineups of all kinds of different teams. Prospects being brought up, and I kind of want to talk about people coming off of injuries, and then also some underperforming guys, some overperforming guys, and trade targets, and all kinds of different stuff. So instead of me rambling, let's just jump into it. Got to make this really quick. I am on my way to California for the rest of the week, which is not where I'm from. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, specifically Columbus, between Dayton and Columbus, and I'm not going to be able to post a video besides this one. So buckle up. We're going to run through this tire fire. Anyways, Ryan McMahon is the hottest. He's the hottest hitter in Major League Baseball right now. He is traditionally a second baseman, but transitioned over to third base this season once somebody got hurt. Brendan Rodgers got hurt, and he's needed to play every day at third base, second base, one of the two. Don't really watch the Rockies a ton because they're not very good at baseball. But over the last 7 days, Ryan McMahon is the number one most individually productive batter in all of Major League Baseball. And he is currently, he's hitting every day in between the third and fourth hole. He is their everyday third baseman as of right now. And he has scored a whole 1/3 of his points for the entire season just over the last 7 days, which brings his average up to a 254 average with a 2.93 total bases per hit, which is wild. 2.93 total bases per hit, averaging almost a triple over the last, I think this is for, the last 7 days or so, which is not super sustainable, but understand that, again, this guy is only to be continued to be added plus 10%. So he's added 50%, or his overall own percentage is gone up 200% just over the last week or so. He had, I think, 4 games in a row where he had a home run, and he will begin to taper off, but understand that this is a player who is extremely hot right now. And when we see extremely hot batters, it usually tends to sustain longer than not. Baseball is one of those just super streaky sports. Cough. Sorry. We talked about Lourdes Gurriel Jr., about how he's one of the most streakiest players in baseball. And whenever he is hot, that's somebody that you want on your roster because he seems to be able to carry rosters when he is that way. A couple of years ago, even like Jesse Winker, seems like he can almost single-handedly carry a roster when he's hot. And then, it becomes almost like a ghost-like figure in your lineup when he's not. So either crazy productive or seems like he's kind of wasting space on your roster. But I think, again, Ryan McMahon, he's playing every single day. He's already got 194 at-bats on the season, so has been healthy. He's going to play in the middle of that lineup and plays in Colorado. Thinner air means more balls into the stands, and though he doesn't have double-digit home runs so far this year, I'd like to think that maybe that would even change by the end of the weekend. Obviously, this is not a player that you would move. The whole concept of this video is I'm basically going to go over guys that I think are comparable to big name guys at their same positions. And I'll talk about them kind of in the next slide. But, if you're looking to make significant trades, to make significant improvements, some of your bigger name guys who are kind of underperforming or performing at the same the same rate as these lessly owned young guys that nobody really pays attention to because they're on smaller markets or just overall on teams that aren't winning a ton. These are how we can make marginal improvements over the season to equivalent to a huge improvement on the year so that when you hit playoffs, you have an all-star roster. So those are my thoughts on Ryan McMahon. I don't think, obviously, there's no way that he can sustain this level of production. But again, so far on the entire season, he has 92 total bases, which is very similar to this other page I was talking about referencing early. He has individually produced the exact same as a Max Muncey, who is currently ranked number 2 at his position, and actually has 20. He has 20 less at bats than Ryan McMahon. And he is not hitting the same average. He's just basically at this point hitting seems like a home run or nothing. But anyways, let's look back to Ryan McMahon. Just basically, again, he's only 20% owned, but he is individually as productive as Max Muncey so far to begin the year. Max Muncey certainly not going to steal any bases or anything. So total bases is the number one stat that we're going to look at. I was one person. I'm 5 minutes in. All right, that was way longer than I expected to, because I don't really care about Ryan McMahon as much as I do Royce Lewis. Royce Lewis I talk about in my pregame outlier shows on Fantasy Six Pack, and even like in my my spreadsheet and everything. I love Royce Lewis. I have him for the approximate 2 weeks or so that he spends in the major leagues the last couple of years before getting hurt for the season, coming off of an ACL tear, which is never something that we love to see, but ACL tears at this point in time are one of the more recoverable injuries, especially from a baseball perspective, as we look for lower body extremity injuries. Let's just talk about the important things. Royce Lewis is going to be the full-time third baseman. I could make an entire segment about how much I dislike Carlos Correa, and the re-signing of Carlos Correa for what he got in Minnesota was one of the dumber things, especially because I have so much faith in Royce Lewis's offensive and defensive abilities. But he is coming back as one of the top 5 prospects in all of Major League Baseball just a couple of years ago. And now he is a ripe 24 years old. He just debuted even on the 29th, so just a couple of days ago, and he is already off to a very, very strong start. Had a home run in his first debut outing, and I am already, again, very much looking forward to the rest of his season. But I think, again, having that shortstop eligibility, and then he's going to gain that third base eligibility after his 10 starts. So after today, he'll need 7 more starts before he gains that third base eligibility. And he has done super well. He's hitting between the 5 and 6 hole. He was again, I said, the top 5 prospects in all of Major League Baseball. He is on this past season. He was averaging 1.83 total bases per hit, so almost a double. We always want to get guys that are hitting 1.5 total bases per hit and up, unless they're a super duper volume guy like a Freddie Freeman or like a Trey Turner, who are just like hitting between the 1 and 3 spots on mega super rosters that are just going to constantly, be on base because of their overall batting average and on base percentage. It kind of like erases that rule, but only for those characters. So the fact that last season, before he got hurt, he was hitting 1.83 total bases per hit on the season, very, very small sample size, is awesome. He was on pace to have a 27 home run season. He had a 300 average, and he, across his minor league career, now that he's had some knee problems, but at 24 years old, we just assume that he's going to still have that 20 to 30 stolen base potential that he showed in the minors. So Royce Lewis, I'm a big believer of. He's only 13% owned, but I see that the ceiling is super duper high on this guy. Again, a top 5 prospect just a couple years ago and only 24 years old. It seems like we forget about these guys at 24 years old when they come up and get hurt or fail immediately at 22. And it's like, well, what were any of us good at 22 years old compared to 24? So let's go on to Matt McLain. Matt McLain was the 91st overall prospect in all of Major League Baseball, brought up by the Reds. All of the Reds prospects are shortstops, and this was the oldest of the few, but he has come up and hit the number 2 hole every single day, wearing a Reds uniform, and is averaging 357, 448 over the last 7 days. But I think what's important is that, again, he's hitting in the 2 spot for the Reds, which is pretty prime time. Kind of sucks for an RBIs and a runs perspective, but just the fact that he's going to be a super duper volume guy. He's the everyday shortstop as of right now. I think they've decided that Jose Barrero needs more time to develop, and they seem to kind of ruined him. He can't hit the ball, but he's a very good defender. Matt McLain's come up and done the opposite. He's averaging 1.55 total bases per hit, and again, at that average and that overall volume, we can only expect to see this guy to continue to produce, and in the second most home run friendly ballpark in Major League Baseball. I'd like to think that over his, he only has 56 at bats so far this season with 2 home runs. If we multiply that for 555, we do. He's going to be a double home run or not a double digit home run guy, for the rest of the season moving forward. At least that's his pace. And, I think, again, just hitting as one of our bigger prospects in the top 100, coming up, really succeeding at 23 years old, and hitting for volume at such a high average. This is a guy who is very much competing above his peers for now, but we'll see if he tapers off or not. And then his teammate, actually, Spencer Steele. I usually don't talk about Reds players very much because there's not a whole lot to talk about, but that's going to be different today because we've got some young guys, young guns really producing. So Spencer Steele, I have never talked about before, just because it seemed he was going to be the everyday third baseman this year from the fact that Nick Senzel was our starting center fielder, can't seem to stay healthy in center field, transition back to third base, which he hasn't played since the minors. Spencer Steele then transitioned over to first base. I don't know what that means for when Joey Votto finally returns. I assume that Spencer Steele would transition back over to third base, and then Nick Senzel back to the outfield. That is remains to be seen, but at least so far this year, he is hitting in between the 3 or the 6 hole, depending if it's a right or a left-handed batter. He is right-handed, so anytime that they hit or they throw a left-handed batter at him, they move him to the 3 spot, so very prime time spot in the batting order. And anytime that there's a right-hander on, he transitions back to the 6. But the Reds, not a ton of power on their roster, but a lot of speed and a lot of juice. So I like to think this guy is going to continue to produce at a pretty sorry about the cough. And you're going to get them. I'm not going to edit them out because I don't have time. I have to get on the plane soon. But though he's been super duper hot over just the last 7 days, brings his to average up to a 288, which is really, really awesome. He is averaging a 2.68 total bases per hit. So the power is there. The extra bases are there. And he's only 2 at-bats short of having 200 at-bats on the season. So he's very much a regular full-time player. So if you have an injury at the first base or third base slot, or just are looking to move away from whatever you have in those positions, this is a guy that's most likely available to you at only 29.1%, unless you play with the whole league of Reds fans. Then that's not the case. Everyone who is a Red is owned just because people want to have someone on the TV to root for that's also on their fantasy team. But we're going to transition to the pitchers that are on the same list. So Mike Soroka has a ton of weight on his name, and I never really understood it. Like back in 2019, he was coming off of his best year, had 171 innings pitched and he had a 2.6 ERA, but only had 142 strikeouts. So you look at a guy who has 171 innings pitched with 30 less strikeouts to him. I just never understood the importance and like the weight like carried with him. Obviously, I did not draft him because of those stats. And then he ended up having 2 horrific lower body injuries like right after that. So by chance kind of like avoided this guy because of injury, and it worked out. But I didn't realize that when he threw 171 innings, which is really a ton for anyone, regardless of the age, 180 is always the goal for like our top line pitchers. He was 21 years old. I couldn't believe, I didn't understand how young this person is. It obviously continues to be now that he's a 23-year-old kid coming into 2023, or I'm sorry, that's very, very poor math. He was 21 years old in 2019. It's been 4 years since then. So now he is 25 years old, ideally. And man, like that was eye-opening to me. Didn't understand how young he was. And a lot of times with pitchers coming up, it's all about control. If you have the control, you will stay on roster kind of thing. We see like how successful Max Fried is because he hits his spots and he is near perfect. We always accept that he's going to be around 10 strikeouts less than his innings pitched number. We're always looking for, a plus K number. We always want more strikeouts than innings pitched, as we've talked about 100 times before. But just given that, like, again, a guy like Max Fried, who's just always hitting his spots, is near perfect, low ERA, that's like the true value. Looking at Michael Soroka, I thought that was cool that he came in the other day off of the IL for the first time since 2020. He threw 6 innings pitched across 83 with an 83 pitch count, meaning that he was super efficient. Did he give up 4 runs? Yes. Did he only strike out 3 people? Yes. But overall, had less hits than innings pitched, and only walked 2 people across 6 innings with only 83 strikeouts. So do I think this is ever going to be a guy who blows people away? Maybe, but I'm going to say that he becomes that in 4 years, not in 2023, as a very ripe 25-year-old coming off crazy injuries. But again, just looking at the overall track record of this guy, again, as a 21-year-old, 171 innings pitched and a 2.68 ERA. I think that, and with a lot of run support, obviously we're not looking to bank on run support, but already in his first inning out, which we always disregard the first inning, the first outings after an injury, because that very first outing off the IL with pitchers is always bad. If they have a good outing off, that's just lucky. Like James Paxton had a crazy start to the season earlier this year with the Red Sox, and then kind of did the opposite where he started out high and then fell off. Usually they start off super low and they climb up as they get used to it. Pitchers are people of habit, creatures of habit, and I only expect him to improve his and though he has a 6 ERA after his one start, he gave up 4 earned runs. His whip was good, so I think he got hit hard but not hit often. So his whip is 1.17. We want our pitchers to have a 1.20 ERA or lower, and anything below that is awesome. And the same thing with ERA. We want our pitchers to have anything with a 3, so a 3.99 equivalent or lower. And as long as we're doing that, if we can add on bonus strikeouts on top of that, we always know that we are going to be in the green. So moving off of Mike Soroka to his teammate, Jared Shuster. Jared Shuster was the highest rated prospect, and I'm pretty sure Jared Shuster's like 23 years old as well. Higher than Dylan Dodd, higher than Bryce Elder, who's having a really awesome year. Jared Shuster's come up now to make a significant push and will sit in that lineup kind of moving forward since Kyle Wright's gone down, Max Fried is down, and they'll need him to contribute moving forward this year. He made the original roster and then had one bad start or 2 bad starts, whatever, to begin the year, and got demoted for Bryce Elder. Now that he's come up, kind of less pressure on him to stick in the lineup. Before it was, there's one spot available. It's between you, Dylan Dodd, and Bryce Elder. It's lots of pressure to succeed in the very, very first couple of starts. Gets demoted to AAA. They bring up Bryce Elder. He was super successful. Now that they have an injury, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to let Jared Shuster figure it out. And if we look over just his last couple of starts, 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 7 strikeouts, in the green. 5 innings pitched, 3 earned runs. It's like a 4.5 ERA, but 5 strikeouts kind of make up for it. And no decisions, still a double-digit outcome. So with him pitching against the Oakland Athletics tonight, I don't necessarily expect him to blow anybody away. But if he goes out and has another start that's similar to his Seattle start, being 6 innings and 7 strikeouts with only 1 earned run, 2 earned runs or less per se, this is a guy really, really just keep your eyes on. Not necessarily add right now, but keep on your radar and make sure you keep up with his whereabouts and such. Miles Mikolas just threw a gem of a start last night. He will never, this has an update, he will never, ever, 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 ever again have an 8-inning pitch game with 10 strikeouts ever again. That's not Miles Mikolas's game. It's guys going to throw over 100 pitches every single game. His ERA is going to be low, has been low in the past only because he's a super control guy, but like almost never has any strikeouts. He has some of these days like down here against Boston, 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 0 strikeouts. And we can see how even though he only gave up 1 run and 4 hits, he only was worth 15 points. Whereas if he would have had equivalent, he would have been in the 20s. Or equivalent strikeouts per innings pitch, he would have been in the 20s. So this is a player, though he is extra hot right now, I think he is a sell high. Though I hope he stays. If you are a Miles Mikolas owner, I hope he stays hot over these next couple of starts. But this would be someone that I would be looking to trade or tag on to a trade really as soon as possible, given how diabolical pitching can be. And people seem to always have or want pitching. If they have it, they still want more. If they don't have it, they're desperate to get some. So Miles Mikolas, I would maybe hold on to him for a couple more starts. Hope that he has positive outings moving forward, and that's the end of that thought. And I don't have any notes for what his whip So it's above what we want it to be. Even though he has the 3.7 ERA, it's pretty solid. He has over 10 strikeouts less than innings pitched, and he has a 1.29 ERA. I think his expected ERA is only going to go kind of through the roof moving forward. But again, I would look at the opportunity of, again, against Kansas City Royals offense, bad. Cincinnati offense, bad. LA Dodgers has been not what they used to be, won't be what they were last year. Still probably a top 10 offense. Boston is going to regress, and Chicago Cubs, not a super awesome offense. We look at his opponents as well. I'd like to think that number one offense, he's playing against number one offense in his next start Tuesday against the Rangers. I think there's going to be a significant drop off. He's not going to be a double-digit point earner on that day, but we will see. Moving on to Ben Lively. So I think Ben Lively is very interesting. So is Ben Lively a sustainable answer for the Reds? And the answer is inevitably no, even though since he's become a starter in that rotation, he's had a 2.08 ERA, a 0.92 whip over his 3 starts. So 17.1 innings pitched. He's had an average of 5.23 innings per start and an awesome 22 strikeouts to walk ratio. But the thing with Ben Lively is anytime we see a guy come up for the first time, we've never seen his name before. He's a new name to us. He may not be a new name to professional baseball. So this individual, even though he has had an incredible, last 3 starts, was in the bullpen to start the year. He's 31 years old, and similarly likely with the Reds, they are going to keep him in this rotation for the remainder of the year to specifically sell him at the deadline. Hopefully he keeps this, me as a Reds fan, hopefully he keeps up this production. So when it comes around closer towards the trade deadline, this is somebody that we can offload for pre-quality prospects to a contender when that time comes. But as of right now, again, we're looking at the stats. He's a 1.99 ERA for the season, including his bullpen stats. Obviously, that's super awesome. And then also all kinds of distractions. I'm not going to edit out of here because I don't have a time. But he has plus strikeouts, so 22 innings pitched, 24 strikeouts, and a 1.99 ERA. Everything that we'd ever want out of a starting pitcher. So, if you're desperate or need to fill people at the end of your week, I think Ben Lively, depending on the matchup, like Sunday versus the Brewers, he might be a pretty safe pick because I don't trust the Brewers to score runs really ever. So let's go on to Brian Bello. Brian Bello is the kind of like the future frontline starter for the Boston Red Sox. Very high prospect last season, came up with them last year and didn't have like a ton of work. Has always kind of had an ERA around the 4s and the 5s to start, but the strikeouts have always been there. So he had 2 really tough starts to begin the year. But since then, he has not given up. So since April 29th for the Red Sox, he hasn't given up more than 2 runs. And though he's been, between 5 and 7 innings, right? He even had a 4 innings pitch last night with even, close to 100 innings pitched. He's just been kind of inefficient. So if we look at kind of the underlying numbers this season so far, even though he has a 3.89 ERA, it's pretty good. 39 strikeouts and 39 innings pitched to his 41 strikeouts. So he has a plus strikeout rating. His whip is a 1.47. So I think the underlying stat is that, he's getting bailed out by run support, or he's just simply kind of getting lucky. The 1.47 whip is equivalent to probably someone who is closer to like a 5 ERA than a 3.89. So, one of those things where we are going to monitor this guy, super duper young, really, really talented. But, this is somebody who has been uber consistent. We look at just, again, since April 29th, he's had all but 1 start beat in the double digits, even with a loss sprinkled in there. So, this is a guy, again, very much on your watch list, but I think his next start is also on a Sunday. So, going against the Tampa Bay Rays, that'll be tough. But if you are absolutely in need of like an emergency start on Sunday to try to like move past and beat your person that you're playing against, I think Brian Bello is going to be, I'd say, like a medium ceiling kind of guy, given that his age and who he's playing against with the Tampa Bay Rays. And then we're on to the next tab. And this has already been 23 minutes. I was hoping the whole thing would be 23 minutes, but this should be a breeze. So I mentioned earlier about like some of the guys that would be looking to trade that have a lot of big name attachment or have a lot of weight carried or attached to their name carrying with them. So even if I look back like at Spencer Steer before, I mentioned that Spencer Steer has 96 total bases on the entire year. So as an individual, he has produced or he has individually reached 96 bases on the year and is only 29% owned across leagues. He's primarily a third baseman, and he is ranked, I think, just inside or outside of the top 10, even being a full-time player on the year. So he's ranked the 9th overall, third baseman as his primary position. But if we look over here at the second slide, and I look at Max Muncey. Max Muncey has 4 less total bases on the entire year, so 4 less bases productive, but he is actually the number 2 ranked third baseman. So and he's only hitting 214 on the entire season. He's just in one of those situations where he is surrounded by a bunch of all-stars at the top or, in those cleanup spots. In that cleanup spot with the Dodgers, not a sustainable player. And if it's a player who gets penalized on top of, if he gets penalized for strikeouts, like I just think this guy is kind of a cancer. He's not somebody I want on my roster, even though he's averaging 3.5 points per game. I just think that his overall game and lack of volume is just going to kind of handicap you. But as of right now, he's ranked the number 2 overall third baseman and has second base eligibility. So I think he has a lot of value to be traded for better assets kind of moving forward. And the same thing kind of like, I don't need to go into all of these people moving forward, but you can kind of just look down the line of like Xander Bogaerts right now has, only 79 total bases. He's actually dealing with like kind of a wrist issue right now. He's in the top 10 at his position. Shortstop's really, really competitive this year. But it's because he hits because he's surrounded by MVP candidates in that roster. And even though that offense is kind of underperforming, Xander Bogaerts is hitting anywhere between the 1 and the 5 slot in that roster, and he will just continue to score points, but it won't be like super consistent individual points. He's pretty dependent on the people around him because he doesn't have a ton of power to his name. Even though he gets a ton of at-bats, again, only 79 total bases on the year, and I know that he hasn't hit more double-digit home runs this year, 7 home runs so far this season. He's just a digressing player who's always really dependent on the volume and having a high batting average. And the second that's not the case, less valuable. So this is someone that I would trade. Same with Dansby Swanson. Dansby Swanson, even though he's played the entire year, is going to play kind of in the heart of that Cubs lineup. The Cubs are going to be sellers at the trade deadline. Absolutely. I like to think that Cody Bellinger, how well he's started out the year, that was absolutely a trade piece when they signed him for was only $17 million for this season. Like Dansby Swanson is going to lose assets around him. They're still a rebuilding roster with him getting most of the money for that franchise, but soon after the deadline, he's not going to have much surrounding him. So Dansby Swanson's another player that, like, given that he plays every single day, and the fact that he I think he's was number 5 overall at this. I think that he's going to digress because, again, he's just playing every single day, but like not uber productive as an individual, given that he's only had 5 home runs and 87 total bases. Ozzie Albies, 96 total bases, but at the same time, this is just a player who's like he's hitting lower in the lineup. I think he's currently 6. He's been around like 6 between the 6 and 7 slot with the Braves. I think a lot of Ozzie Albies. I just think that, like, given his production and numbers so far this season, it's just been like pretty average, like compared to like earlier in his career. He's not going to be stealing bases anymore with his lower body injuries from last year. I think he has lost a significant step, and they're not going to risk his health in that regard. Obviously the power numbers are still there. I still think he's going to be around a 25 home run guy, but I just think with so much weight that's carried on Ozzie Albies, and considering how productive these guys over here are that play very similar positions, I just think that this is a possible trade piece that you could use in your favor. And then Matt Chapman is very much on the decline, finally cooling down. I wish that if any of you guys had Matt Chapman early, hope that you traded him at his highest value, but we can even see that, he's, again, 98 total bases is really, really good. But if you're considering Matt Chapman, who strikes out a ton and you get penalized for strikeouts, comparing him to a 96 total bases guy versus like a Spencer Steele, who's only 96 total bases and 29% owned. If you can trade away Matt Chapman and tag to somebody else for a really, really solid, significant increase player where you need guys, Spencer Steele is going to be a guy that's going to fill in and, be able to produce and contribute almost at the same rate. Because we see this across both situations. They're very, very similar players to, compare against the year. Well, I don't even know. Matt Chapman is ranked the 8th, so he's one spot ahead of Spencer Steele overall production, but Matt Chapman carries a lot more weight just because, he's just on a known roster and not a Red. And moving on to some of the pitchers that I would start to think about moving away from, and these are guys that I we see Shane Bieber, Kirby, and Steele below, but this is a situation where Shane Bieber has to be absolutely perfect every time that he goes out. The only reason that he scored any more, so he's only scored 4 more points than a George Kirby that was drafted, I like to think, close to the 200s. Shane Bieber is very much a top 30 probably drafted guy. Hasn't had the strikeout since 2020, but the fact that he is 71 innings pitched with only 49 strikeouts, he has to be absolutely perfect every game that he goes out there, and he's just overall just not as sharp as he's been before. And the thing is this is a player who is looked at as I have a lot of faith in a very young Shane Bieber. I think he's only 27. I think we're in a very similar class, but he is cats rolling into all my stuff. Shane Bieber is looked at as a top 30 player. If I scroll down here, he's probably even drafted higher. 20th overall, he was drafted. So if you're talking about a top 20 player, though I don't dislike Shane Bieber, it's one of those things where he carries a top 20 player weight, but is never going to produce at a top 20 player production because he's just not getting those bonus points. And on top of it, something that we don't like to forecast and bank on, not getting a ton of run support in Cleveland either. So the only reason he is outscored his peers below him as of right the second hasn't outscored Justin Steele is because he's just had more innings to throw the ball. So if you're a Shane Bieber owner, really, really consider trading him to get someone more consistent. And we can go kind of over trade strategy and who I would look after it in the next video. But on the next, George Kirby, similar situation. George Kirby was really just relying on having a super low whip. He got knocked around a little bit his last start out, which kind of sucked. But even after giving up 7 runs across 4.2 innings against the Pirates, is not something you want to see. Still carries a 3.43 ERA and even more important, a 1.1 whip, which is pretty awesome. The strikeouts are not where we want to see it, but he was the same player kind of last year. He has improved from last year to this year, but as we see, the numbers sort of, they're not ballooning. It's one start that's poor. But as we kind of see, just over the last couple of starts, he's given up 6 or more hits, to everyone he's faced over these last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 starts. But one of his better commodities is not giving up any walks. He doesn't give up any free sellouts. Gave up 1, 1, 1, 0, and 1 walks over those last 5 starts, and that's really been his claim to fame. But the strikeouts aren't necessarily there to just kind of put him over to make him a really special player. But I think he could be traded for a really special player, given the track record to start the year. And then next, I also own Justin Steele. Drafted him super late in this year's draft across all of my leagues, 225th overall. So this is a guy that last year had plus strikeouts. His ERA is about the same as it was last year. So this year it's 2.77. He had 1 bad start, similar to George Kirby last. He had 1 bad start against Cincinnati this last time out. But last year he was a 3.2 ERA with 120 strikeouts or something like that, and 120 innings pitched with 132 strikeouts or something like that. And this is why I drafted the player. I think there's a lot of weight carried with him. But as we now hit that 65 inning pitched number, every single website said that Justin Steele is only going to get 160 or not 100, 120 innings pitched to start the year. So we'll begin to see him maybe lose, opportunities to go into that sixth inning, that seventh inning that he's done before. Now that they've really competed in the beginning of the year, figure out where their lineup is. The Cubs are not going to compete for the playoffs. I think they're going to be sellers. They're not going to sell Justin Steele. He's too valuable. But given that they're going to be sellers, they're also going to start restricting his volume, and they're going to be restricting his opportunity to earn you fantasy points. So not his fault, regardless of what his production is. It's just going to not be what it could be. Similar situation with like Patrick Sandoval. They're keeping a 6-man rotation in Los Angeles, kind of forever moving forward to protect Ohtani. And by association, Patrick Sandoval is just never going to be allowed to pitch more than 120, 130 innings, even though he is one of their better pitchers on roster. Similar situation. So, and the next, just for funsies, obviously my friend Shane in Australia, super duper pumped about Liam Hendriks coming back to the league. Obviously, he had a really tough first outing. You want those people to come back. Somebody comes back from cancer, you want them to come back and pitch 1 inning, 3 strikeouts, and the whole crowd goes nuts. Obviously, that wasn't the case, but there's no reason to fear. The thing with Liam Hendriks over the last couple of years, and really over his entire career, he is a top 10 closer for these reasons. He has averaged an over 10 K per 9 ratio across 7 of the last 8 seasons he's been in Major League Baseball. So super duper consistent. Starting pitcher out of the bull, or not starting pitcher, relieved pitcher out of the bullpen, and one of the more reliable closers who's been a top 50 draft pick for a reason over the last couple of years. He's been the reliever of the year twice, both with Oakland. He's been a 3-time All-Star. Both of those, or all 3 of those, have been with the White Sox. But his really special, what makes him special and really differentiated above the rest, and why he is a top 50 player, before the season started, and I know he's 34 years old now, but his ability to convert 2 innings plus saves, so coming in the 8th inning, pitching the 8th and the 9th, really just maximizes his ability to pull away from his peers and be super special. So he still is that guy. They're going to warm him up. He even threw 30 pitches, 27 pitches last night just to get through his first inning. But very, very clearly, no one is ever out of it in the AL Central. Everybody seems pretty mediocre, at best. I think the White Sox still have a really, really young, talented offensive roster. The bullpen itself is ranked 29th out of 30 teams from an ERA perspective. And if we look at the power rankings, even just before the year, and I know that before the year power rankings are one thing and whatever, but the White Sox starting roster really is, there's a ton to lean on. They have health. They're just figuring it out kind of thing. So I still have a lot of faith that the White Sox starting roster is going to get it together, but they've needed Liam Hendriks more than anybody in that bullpen. And the fact that it's been so bad and they're still in contention, to essentially finish out the year and maybe make a run at the expanded playoffs. I would not count out Liam Hendriks as eventually becoming, just even in a month or so, that 2 innings pitched strikeout, all the strikeouts, closer for the White Sox, because that's what we've just come accustomed to. So that is the end of the video. Gosh, 37 minutes. I can't figure out how to make these less than that amount of time. But anyways, I'm on vacation. I'll see you guys next week. I really appreciate all the support, and see you later. Bye.